Walk into an Amish garden in July, and the first thing you notice isn't what's there, it's what's missing. No skeletonized leaves, no slug trails glinting on the porch steps at dawn, no half-eaten tomatoes rotting on the vine. 100 feet away, an English neighbour is standing in his own garden, holding a spray bottle he bought for $12, looking at the same beetles, eating the same plants he's been fighting since May. The Amish family isn't spraying anything. They haven't been to a hardware store in years. Walk the rows yourself and you'll notice the smell first, wood smoke and turned earth, instead of the sharp chemical tang that clings to a freshly sprayed yard. And their garden looks like it belongs on the cover of a seed catalogue from 1890. That gap is not luck. It's a set of techniques that predate the pesticide industry by about a century. Techniques that never got patented, never got a barcode, and never made anyone in Ohio or Delaware a dime. 12 of them, actually. Some of them sound like superstition until you understand the chemistry underneath. A few of them are so simple they feel like a trick question. And one of them, the one most people never hear about, is the actual reason a lot of this knowledge stayed inside these communities instead of ending up on a store shelf. It's not because anyone was hiding it, it's because there was never a way to sell it. Let's start with the mild stuff, the kind of thing a grandmother tells you while she's snapping beans, and work up from there. The first trick is wood ash, and it's older than the Amish themselves, going back to European peasant farming long before anyone crossed the Atlantic. After a fire in the wood stove burns down, the ash gets swept into a bucket and dusted in a ring around the base of squash plants, cabbage, and anything potato beetles like to chew on. The ash is alkaline, and it's sharp at a microscopic level, and soft-bodied pests like slugs and beetle larvae don't cross it comfortably. It's not a kill switch, it's a fence. Run a bare hand through a bucket of the stuff and it feels almost silky, fine as talcum. Nothing that looks like it could stop anything. But a slug's underside is essentially one long muscle wrapped in slime, and that slime dries out fast against alkaline ash. And every stove in an Amish kitchen produces that fence for free, every single week, all winter long. The second is companion planting, and this is where the chemistry starts to matter. Marigolds next to tomatoes aren't decoration. Marigold roots release a compound that root knot nematodes can't tolerate, and the smell of the leaves confuses the moths that lay eggs on tomato plants. Basil does something similar. And the classic Three Sisters planting, corn, beans, and squash sharing one mound, isn't just about maximizing a small plot. The squash leaves are broad and prickly, and that texture alone keeps raccoons and some burrowing pests from walking through the bed at all. 3 plants, 1 problem solved for each. Then there's the layer most people skip past because it sounds too simple to work. Crushed eggshells and used coffee grounds, worked into the soil around lettuce and strawberries. Slugs move on a single foot of mucus, and that foot doesn't like crossing anything gritty or acidic. It's the same principle as the ash, just built from kitchen scraps instead of the stove. Nothing here costs money. Nothing here has an expiration date. That's rung 1. Grandmother-level knowledge, and it already outperforms half of what's sold at the garden centre. Rung 2 is where it starts getting specific enough that you'd need someone who actually farms this way to teach you, not a blog post. Diatomaceous earth is the 4th trick, and it looks like flour, but it's actually the fossilized shells of ancient algae, ground down until the edges are microscopic razors. Dusted along the base of a chicken coop or a pantry shelf, it doesn't poison anything. It cuts through the waxy coating on an insect's exoskeleton, and the bug dies of dehydration, not chemistry. Amish households have used it in root cellars for generations, long before anyone in a lab coat gave it a scientific name. It smells like nothing. It works on ants, fleas, roaches, and grain weevils alike, and a £5 bag lasts most families an entire growing season. Fifth is a living system instead of a substance, guinea fowl. A flock of 6 or 8 guineas turned loose on a few acres will strip the property of ticks at a rate that a hired exterminator can't match, because the birds are working 16 hours a day, every day, for the cost of some cracked corn. One Lancaster County dairy operation keeps a permanent flock specifically for this reason, walking the fence lines each morning the way you'd walk a dog, except the dog is also eating your Lyme disease risk down to almost nothing. Chickens do a version of the same job underground, scratching up grubs and squash bug eggs before they ever hatch. There's a sound to it too, a constant low clucking and scratching at the tree line that most families stop noticing after a while, the way you stop noticing a refrigerator hum. Except that sound is worth more to the farm than most of the equipment in the barn. But here's where the ledger starts to tip. Every trick so far has cost nothing but time, and time is the one thing an Amish household has more of than most modern ones, because the whole day is already built around physical work. That's the trade, no product to buy, just labour that was going to happen anyway. Sixth on the list is bay leaves and cedar shavings, tucked into flour bins, grain sacks, and the corners of a root cellar. Pantry moths and weevils navigate mostly by smell, hunting for the specific scent profile of stored grain, and cedar oil and bay leaf both scramble that signal badly enough that infestations that would wreck a modern pantry in weeks simply never establish themselves. Grandmothers called it keeping the cellar sweet. Chemists call it repellent terpenes. Same result either way. Seventh is borax mixed with sugar water, set out in shallow dishes near an anthill. The sugar draws worker ants in, they carry the mixture back to the colony to feed the queen, and the borax does what it does to an ant's digestive system from the inside, wiping out the colony at its source, instead of just the ants you can see on the counter. This one is close enough to what's sold in stores today that you could call it the missing link between folk method and modern pesticide. The difference is the Amish version costs about 40 cents and takes 5 minutes to mix. Eighth is a tobacco spray made by steeping cheap pipe tobacco in water overnight and straining the liquid into a spray bottle. Nicotine is one of the most effective aphid killers ever discovered, strong enough that it was the basis for a category of modern pesticides before those got phased out for being too toxic to handle safely at industrial scale. In a home garden, in small batches, it still does exactly what it did in 1870. Aphids and spider mites die on contact, and the plant is fine within a day. The one caution every family passes down, along with the recipe, is to wash hands thoroughly after mixing it, because the same compound that kills an aphid in seconds isn't gentle on human skin either. That's not a footnote, it's the reminder that natural and harmless were never the same word, not in 1870 and not now. Now we're at the rung where things get strange enough that even people inside these communities argue about whether it's science or superstition. Ninth is copper. Strips of copper flashing, sometimes paired with a galvanized zinc nail, driven into the ground around the base of vulnerable plants, like a tiny, ankle-high fence. Some old-timers will tell you it's electrical, that copper and zinc in wet soil create a faint current that slugs and cutworms feel and refuse to cross. And there's a real, if narrow, body of research on electrical barriers reducing slug movement under lab conditions. Whether the mechanism is voltage or just the sharp metal edge doing the same job as the ash and the eggshells, nobody's fully settled it. What's not in dispute is the result. Gardens edged in copper for 2 decades running, and the beetle damage that shows up on every other row simply doesn't show up on that one. Run a finger along a strip of that flashing after a rain, and it's cold and slightly tacky with oxidation. Green starting to creep in at the edges, and it's easy to understand why an 8-year-old would believe there's something alive in that fence, even if the grown-ups can't fully explain why. 10th is the barn cat, which sounds too obvious to count as a trick until you see the math. A single, unfed, semi-feral barn cat will take out several rodents a week without being asked, without a trap to check, without a body to dispose of by hand. Most Amish farms keep 2 or 3, deliberately underfed, just enough that they stay motivated. And the grain loss from mice and rats drops close to 0 without a single trap ever being set. It's not sentimental. It's a working animal with a job, the same as the horse pulling the plough. 11th, and this is the systemic one, the one that ties every other trick together. Crop rotation plans specifically around pest life cycles, not just soil nutrients. Move the potatoes to a field a quarter mile from last year's plot, and the Colorado potato beetles that overwintered in last year's soil wake up in spring, find nothing to eat, and mostly die before they ever locate the new crop. It takes a farmer who's tracking, in his head or in a ledger, exactly what grew where for the last 4 years. That's not a spray you can buy on a Tuesday. That's a decade of memory turned into a map. No app tracks it, no spreadsheet. It lives in a notebook in the kitchen drawer, or, just as often, in the head of whoever's been walking these same fields the longest, which is usually the person nobody thinks to interview. And that brings us to the 12th trick, the one that's rarely written down anywhere because it isn't really a trick at all. It's a decision. It's called a sacrifice row. Somewhere near the edge of the main garden, a family plants a strip of something the pests love more than anything else nearby. Usually a cheap, fast-growing crop like radishes or a stand of amaranth, and they let the bugs have it. Every single morning, someone walks that row, and every single morning they pick the beetles and caterpillars off by hand, one at a time, into a bucket of soapy water. It's slow, it's tedious. It requires a body out there at 6 in the morning before the heat sets in every day for the entire growing season, with nothing to show for it but a bucket of dead bugs and a garden that never gets infested badly enough to need anything stronger. The bucket itself has a smell after a few weeks. Soap gone sour, mixed with crushed beetle shells, the kind of smell that never makes it into anyone's nostalgic version of farm life. Nobody puts that bucket on a postcard. But it's the reason the radishes get eaten to the ground and the tomatoes 3 feet away never lose a single leaf. That's the real reason most of this never made it into a product line. Not because anyone hid it, because there's no bottle to put a sacrifice row in. You can't sell a family 45 minutes of bent-over labor at sunrise. You can sell them a spray that promises to do it for them instead. And that spray needs replacing every 3 weeks forever, which is a much better business than a technique that costs nothing and works because someone was willing to show up. That's the trade the whole list has been making, rung by rung. The ash, the eggshells, the guinea fowl, the sacrifice row. None of it is forbidden in the sense of a secret the industry buried. It's just unprofitable in a way that a company can't survive on. A can of spray has a shelf life and a repurchase cycle. Patience doesn't. There's a version of this story where that sounds like an insult to modern pest control, and it isn't meant as one. Exterminators solve real emergencies, the kind of infestation that's already past the point where hand-picking beetles off a radish row is going to help. What's different is the starting point. Modern pest control assumes the problem shows up first, and the response comes after. The approach built into these farms assumes the opposite, that the garden itself should already be a hard place for a pest to survive, long before there's anything to spray. None of this is really about the Amish being frozen in the past either, whatever the postcards suggest. Plenty of these families make decisions about technology the same way anyone weighs a trade-off, choosing what serves the community and what doesn't. And pest control is one of the places where the old way simply never stopped being the efficient way. It isn't nostalgia keeping the ash bucket by the wood stove. It's that nobody's found a reason to replace it. So the question worth sitting with isn't whether any of these 12 tricks actually work. The evidence says most of them do. Some through documented chemistry, a couple through mechanisms nobody's fully explained yet. The real question is what it says about the last 100 years that the techniques costing nothing but time quietly disappeared from most kitchens, while the ones you have to keep buying took over the shelf. Somewhere between your grandmother's garden and the one you're standing in now, patience got replaced by a purchase. None of these 12 tricks require joining anything or believing anything. A bucket of wood ash doesn't care what you believe. The eggshells don't ask for commitment beyond next Tuesday morning. What they ask for is closer to what the sacrifice row asks for. Showing up. At the same time, for as long as it takes, without a guarantee stamped on the label. That's a harder sell than any product on a shelf. And maybe that's the actual 12 tricks the Amish still have and most modern gardens have lost. Not the ash or the copper or the guineas specifically. The willingness to be out there at 6 in the morning before anyone's paying you to be. Whether that was a fair trade is something only you can answer standing over your own tomato plants.